Look at this. I've got a picture of a psychic window. Why do we talk about psychic in a professional course? Because the uncertainty of this recession has increased the psychic business by more than 200%. Is it just the act of a desperate people? Well, perhaps, but the growth of the psychic and other self-help industries indicates a deeper truth in both good times and bad. It's dealing with the unknown that frightens people. Not being able to read the situation creates stress in our brains, and we seek all available means to solve that stress. Rational explanations for behaviors are not always to be found, but they are not wholly unpredictable either. So what I have for you here is a great quote from the director of the MBA Leadership Program at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Not too shabby. MBA students may get by on their technical skills those first couple years out of school, but soon it's leadership and communication that come to the force in distinguishing the managers whose careers take off. Check this out. In 2013, Job Outlook reported employers' rate of candidates' soft skills and qualities in order of importance. Number 1 was the ability to verbally communicate with people inside and outside of the organization. We do that in this class. Number 2, the ability to work in a team structure. We cover that in this class. Number 3, the ability to make decisions and solve problems. We talk about that especially among teams. And on and on. Communication is what gets you the jobs and the promotions. So this is it. This is our big model of communication. It may seem complicated at first glance. It's really not if you take it step by step. We made this model to study it so that we can diagnose a miscommunication when it occurs. There's no sense in misunderstanding someone and just saying, well, they're stupid. Well, that doesn't help. It's a much better idea to know exactly where the miscommunication went wrong rather than lumping the whole problem into name-calling. Although it may seem difficult, communication is only ever between two people. Even in a large crowd, it's only between two people, A and B in this model. The message from the speaker may be understood differently from person to person. You've seen this when someone walked into class one day without an assignment that was due and really had no idea it was due that day. They had a misunderstanding the prior class period. But even knowing that, it's important to understand why people choose to intentionally communicate. First, there's a stimulation to say something or to do something, and it's that stimulation that can come from an internal source, such as a thought, or an external source, such as the boss telling you to tell another employee something. In the picture, one man is yelling through a megaphone at the other. I hope it was not the boss-employee thing, as that's terrible for morale. Frequently, a misunderstanding comes from someone thinking that the communication was from an internal source, and we do tend to hold people more accountable for it when it really was from an external source. Even if you understand where that first idea to communicate came from, it's important to understand the speaker's or the actor's motivation. Some motivations are good, and if we lived in that kind of world, well, life would look more like a Disney movie. Sometimes the motivation is sincere. Other times it's not. If you will, recall junior high and the gossip that infected the whole school at times. Some people seem to have never outgrown that mindset. I've always questioned the person who gossips to tell you something that's really none of your business, as it only serves to cause problems. That type of miscommunication is a motivation issue, and the motivation is always a bad one. So we've covered the fact that there are two communicators, and we've covered that there's a stimulus and a motivation. Next, we have to consider how we say the message. The photos show two different ways a manager might tell someone they need to correct an action. Of course, each will get the job done, but one way, the boss who is yelling, will build resentment in the employee and open himself up to acts of pettiness and revenge. The coach on the lower picture is more likely to get the message across and keep good team spirit. Miscommunication happens when a message is encoded correctly or decoded incorrectly. Surrounding all of the prior areas is our individual frames of reference. The list is endless, but these are just some of the more common frames that can cause a miscommunication between two people. Imagine someone with an advanced vocabulary talking with someone of limited vocabulary. I've had it happen with me. The person who never finished high school later confided to me that he was terrified to speak with me for fear that I would judge him harshly. Thankfully, we kept talking, and he realized I wasn't that sort, and I changed the words I chose to use so that communication was easier. I kind of dropped my big professor words for more common vocabulary set. If you don't think race plays a role in how two people can communicate a situation differently, just Google #WhileBlack and see what the media has to say. Gender is also a big deal. Men may not realize just how dangerous a parking lot at night can feel to a woman. It's from the messages women have received their whole lives that basically tell them that the world is not a safe place, especially at night, and especially alone. Communication, even a friendly, "Hey," when said at night in a parking lot, will not have the same meaning as the greeting in the daytime. We could go on and on through each one, but please take a moment and think about how each one of these areas listed could cause a miscommunication. Another way to think of frame of reference is that it's your own personal window to the world. What you see above are 3 windows. I bet there's one you like more than others, one you'd like to have in your own home. The truth is, everyone thinks that their outlook looks like that upper window. A bay window, clear glass, 3 sides, glass that opens to the world and shows a clear view of everything around you. And when we meet somebody who has a different worldview, we tend to think that they just don't see things clearly. We may think that their worldview or understanding of a situation is clouded by their own limitations, something like the window on the bottom left, clouded glass. If we meet someone who has a dramatically different view from our own, we might even think that their worldview or understanding is so limited they don't even have any glass in their windows, and that their window is nothing more than a small hole. We sometimes think their limited knowledge or understanding of how we see the world is due to any variety of reasons, such as poverty or race, education, gender, sexual orientation, religious or political beliefs. I could go on and on. The truth is that all people think they see the world clearly, and misunderstandings occur because the other person has a limited view. The real skill in overcoming miscommunication is to understand that their worldview is just as clear and valid as your own to them. It's a struggle, but it's worth it to meet and understand so many people that we come into contact with every day. One of the more powerful, realistic, and expensive miscommunications due to frame of reference was between NASA engineers and the engineers at Lockheed Martin. NASA engineers used metric measurements, Pascal, and Lockheed Martin engineers used English measurements, pound-force per square inch. NASA designed the Mars Explorer and Lockheed Martin built it. Imagine the years and millions of dollars that went into this project. Designing, redesigning, building, getting approvals, launching the rocket with the explorers, waiting the months and months for it to reach Mars, and then, as the Explorer attempted to merge into the Mars atmosphere, the formulas were wrong. It burned up in entry. No data was gathered. Imagine the despair on those NASA engineers' faces as they excitedly waited for it to go into orbit, only to sit with stunned faces as no data came back. No commands were returned. All of this happened because each organization just assumed the other one understood something as fundamentally basic as measurement systems. The NASA engineers assumed Lockheed used the universal measurement system the rest of the world uses, and Lockheed engineers assumed NASA, an American organization, used American measurements. Assumption mistakes of frame of reference wasted years of development and millions of dollars. If you will, let's just take a look at difference in cultural values. This was from a study in 2010 of cultural values, the top 10 cultural values of Americans, Japanese, and Arabic peoples. Just looking at the American values, would you say that those values listed there are top 10 American-style values? If you look at the study under the Japanese values and the Arabic values, you'll notice that not a single one of the American values appears in the other two. Is it any wonder then that Americans frequently have a difficult time understanding why people in Asia and Middle Eastern cultures see things so differently? It might also explain why we are in conflict with some of those cultures more so than with other cultures. There is more of an in-depth study of culture in other chapters. Next on our journey through the model of communication is code. It's just the symbol of meetings. There are 3 different types of code that we use. So many of us spend a lot of time preparing for an important conversation by thinking about the words that we're going to use. In actuality, the words, the verbal part, are just 7 to 10% of the message we send. Paralanguage, which is how we say the words, it's how you know something is sarcastic. It's the tone, the pitch, the volume, etc. that you use to give meaning to your words. And paralanguage accounts for about 10 to 20% of our meaning. It's how you know someone says, "I love you," versus "I love you." Finally, we must talk about nonverbal communication. This is where 70% of the meaning of a message exists. Nonverbal communication could be body language, eye contact, artifacts such as the clothes you wear, the items you carry, your surroundings, touch, even smell. That part of communication, nonverbal, is really where people ought to spend more time preparing. Let's just talk about those word choices, that's 7 to 10%. Think about how we describe things. Wouldn't you rather drive a pre-owned car than a used car? I wonder how many of you are associates or team members rather than just employees. And do you have customers or guests? I can assure you it's better to bring an issue or an opportunity to your manager than a problem. And don't even get me started on the R word. It makes a difference. You may think it's being politically correct, and perhaps you're right. However, if you take the time to choose your words perfectly, you're more likely to end up with a more perfect communication experience. Next, in the communication model, we'll talk about channel, which is how you send the message. We're going to rate each channel in terms of richness. Richness just means how much of the message gets through. Face-to-face communication is the richest channel we have. You have all 3 codes, verbal, paralanguage, and nonverbal. I guess phone calls would be next because you're going to get the verbal and the paralanguage. Emails may come in next with more words as there's better chance of clear communication. Texts are not rich at all. In fact, that's why we had to create emojis. I bet everyone has typed a text only to realize, okay, that's not okay. That needs a winky face. We're almost done now. Look in the middle. You'll see feedback. It has arrows on both ends. It's important to realize that feedback is occurring at all times, both directions. While one person is speaking, you are responding and changing your response to their words and actions as they change their words, tones, and actions to your response. It's a continuous loop. All right, we're at the second to last item, and we have the environment. Notice how it surrounds everything. Did you take an early class or a work shift? Maybe you're a night owl instead. Have you ever tried to stay awake during your non-peak times? If so, any communication you attempted was probably not optimal. If you've ever sat in a class that was so hot you could feel the sweat running down your back, it was hard to pay attention, I bet. Not the best communication time. The environment really changes whether or not you got the message. And finally, there's noise, represented here by the little lightning bolts. There are 2 kinds of noise. Noise is anything that gets in the way of you understanding what was being said and communicating to others that you did correctly understand. For instance, external noise would be the flickering light in the classroom. Those drive me nuts. Construction noise is outside. An outfit that looks so cute but is so tight or uncomfortable it's drawing attention away from the moment. Really, anything outside of your body that is taking away from your attention span. Think about it as a mosquito that's just driving you crazy. Internal noise is anything that is going on inside your body that distracts you from a moment of communication. I found some pictures you might recognize from those you've been in contact with. Not you, you're perfect and wonderful just the way you are, but you know, those people. Ever tried to pay attention when you have those bodily functions that steal your attention? Honestly, when you have to pee, that's it. Nothing else matters. Or have you ever known someone in love? The kind of, I just met you and I'm crazy in love with you kind of love? The kind of love where you just want to send them home from work because they're getting nothing done. What about people who are so down in the dumps? Just watch any commercial on depression and you'll see that illness will steal your joy and also the very ability to pay attention. Well, how about being sick? If you're sick, and if you've ever had to take a test, you probably didn't do as well as you would have if you'd been in good health. And then there's that being a little, well, I don't know what that young person's feeling, a little off their game. Don't even get me started trying to talk to someone who's had one too many. It's pointless to even talk to them or think they will remember or even respond correctly. That's internal noise. So that's it. That's the model in small steps. You may be asked to critique a miscommunication and tell me where on the model it went wrong. The reason we study models is so that we can analyze an error and fix it. Just like a doctor studies the systems of the body to fix anything wrong, we want to fix the area of communication that went wrong. You may have had a bad communication experience with someone, and rather than being able to pinpoint exactly where it went wrong, you just said, well, they're stupid. That didn't get you very far. I hope your physician doesn't have the same attitude. You go in with a sore throat and they give you stitches in your finger. It's worth understanding the model of how we communicate, especially considering that we do it all day, every day, even when we sleep.